So good morning, dear friends. Thank you for joining us once again. I think there are quite a few people who will be joining us during the course of this session. The first session of our 2 days international webcon on enhancing happiness quotient in the age of technology. The topic of the first session is Indian culture and happiness. Dear friends, when you saw the topic and when you saw the name, the person who is going to make the presentation, I think you would have been a little surprised because it's not an Indian and an Australian making a presentation on Indian culture and the connected happiness to it. This person is a great personality. It was indeed my pleasure when I was a part of his presentation, when I had been for my refresher course at Center for Professional Development in Higher Education in New Delhi. And this person came, and he started speaking in a language that usually foreigners are not accustomed to. Not only the language, but also the way the presentation was done, possibly out of maybe 18 sessions that I might have undergone in that particular refresher course, I recorded only 4 sessions. And Mr. Charles Thompson's session is very much with me even this day. And I, keep watching, keep listening to it. And I'm really amazed, the magic of the words that this person used, while making that presentation. And I had promised him that day that, sir, you will be in Mangalore pretty soon, somewhere in the month of October. This happened in last September. So maybe next academic year, definitely you will be in Mangalore and, we will host one program where you will be the speaker. But then because of the COVID situation, academics have not yet begun. I mean to say the face-to-face kind of academics has not yet begun. But then technology brings us closer. And though Mr. Charles has, gone back to Delhi, gone back to Sydney, I beg your pardon, still he is able to connect with us live on the screen. And I'm very privileged to introduce such a marvelous personality right here. Yes, a little bit of info about Mr. Charles Thompson. I want everyone to listen to each of the words that I say about this man very carefully. And you'll be excited to hear each and every word. I will begin with Charles Thompson. He's an actor. You may be wondering which movies. Hindi movies, Marathi movies. And very interesting about this man is his email ID. His email ID is charlesbiharilal@gmail.com. After topping his school exams in Australia at the age of 13 years, he traveled by himself to India and spent 11 years in Bihar at a yoga institute. Now an adult, having spent his youth in Bihar, he had to adjust his life in Australia. In 1 year, he completed 10 certificate courses with straight A's, taught yoga and meditation at ABC Macquarie, UTS and Sydney University. Served Thai food to Sydney through Khao Thai group of restaurants. So there also we have the Indianized version of Khao Thai right there. And he's serving up to 900 Thai meals a day in Sydney CBD, catering for Thai Airways, providing 3 meals a day at Sydney Showground for 4,000 yoga enthusiasts. Now, coming on to his acting skills, he has acted in a movie 1909, Marathi language film released in 2014 in Maharashtra, and he was playing the character of one Mr. Jackson. He was playing the role of one Mr. Jackson, and also he made the cover page of the Marathi newspaper Samna, made appearances in Marathi television soaps. He has also been credited with guest appearances in Hindi TV serials Swargini and Code Red. He has worked in Hindi films Prati Chaya. It is awaiting release now. He has also been a part of HCL Technology commercials. Okay, then he joined Z News Hindi and WION, covering the Uttar Pradesh and the Municipal Corporation of Delhi elections. He was very famously known as, after his presentation is done, you can go back to Google and search for this Auto Wale Babu. He is known by this name, Auto Wale Babu, and it was a huge success with viewership, in tens of millions. He joined My Nation, another news channel, and covered the state elections for Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Rajasthan. He regularly travels as a guest jury moderator at international film and literature festivals and numerous formal events. He has been an anchor for 11-part series of our very own Doordarshan on cuisine and culture, Wah Kya Taste Hai, on season 2. He has also taken part in, Joe's Talks, India's equivalent to TED Talks. He has been a part of Australian documentary called, very interesting, Bihari Lal, the Australian Wanderer. He has just completed a lead role in Gai Hamari Mata Hai. This is an Indian, Bollywood Hindi comedy film made on Indian cows, and it will be shown very soon at the International Film Festival globally. As far as his experience is concerned, he has been an anchor and host of India's national broadcaster Doordarshan in March 2019 till date, but presently he's in Sydney, so possibly you will not see him hosting events in Doordarshan at present. So when he's back from Sydney, yes. Then Black Pepper Production, he has acted in Hindi movie, Hindi Bollywood movie. Then he has also been a moderator, anchor, and international jury of National Film Development Corporation. Then, as I mentioned about being an anchor for Indian state elections, covering almost 5 states now. Also, he has been a part of a .com, program, Karigar.com. This is Australia's digital contact plus business branding documentary film. That is for a period of 3 years. As I said, he also hosts the Joe's Talks, the India equivalent of TED Talks, and he's a guest lecturer and speaker where I have been, privileged to listen to him in Delhi. And, the list of universities is very long. From Sydney across to India, almost all universities Sir has covered, giving his expert talks. Then a news correspondent and actor for Z Media, and he has also been a customer relations and legal, partner in Eco India as well. I am very, very privileged to introduce such a magnanimous and very resourceful personality as Mr. Charles Thompson. And it is our privilege, sir, that you are taking up this session on the topic Indian culture and happiness. Purposefully, I have kept the captions on so that we don't miss out on Charles's pronunciation. But I don't know, when he starts speaking Hindi, I don't know what the captions will do. So please excuse us, if the words are not very clear in the captions, as you can read down below. So, sir, on behalf of Government First Grade College Kaur, on behalf of all the participants, आपको नमस्कार करता हूं और आपका इस पहले सेशन में इंडियन कल्चर और हैप्पीनेस के इस सेशन में आपका मैं स्वागत करता हूं. Over to you, Mr. Charles Thompson.
Namaste, Ram Ram, Salam. Firstly, my sincere thanks to Professor Manoj Lewis for this opportunity to speak about Indian culture and happiness. And truly, I'm a great lover of India. I'm at heart an Indian and Nagri to Bilelia, but that will kabhi koi dusra din ke baare mein baat karenge. Now, I'll try and keep most of the conversation or most of my presentation in English, but I'm a great lover of the Hindi language and a little bit of every other language in India. Okay, I first think I would like to start with, and I thought I would talk about things in Indian culture which have had a profound influence on the West that are not so well known, and they have brought wonderful benefits to us. The first thing I'd like to start with was in the early 70s. My first exposure to India was reading literature by an author called Arthur Avalon. And in fact, they were translations from Sanskrit. And this particular gentleman, up until 1915, was the Chief Justice of India. Now, this gentleman's actual name was Sir John Woodroffe. And there's a beautiful story about how India transformed him. He was the Chief Justice there in Calcutta, and he had this case, and he was very confused. So he went home, and for those of you who have been to Calcutta and seen some of the marble palaces, they're beautiful. He was in his palace, pacing up and down, and his assistant had never seen him like this. So he went up to him and he said, "Sir, aapko kya taklif, kya ho gaya?" And he said, "I have this court case. I know what decision I should make, but I simply can't speak. I simply freeze. I don't understand what's happening." And the gentleman looked at him and said, "Sir ji, mantra istemal kar raha hai." So that inspired this gentleman. He retired as the Chief Justice of India, this British gentleman. He locked himself away for 3 years and studied Sanskrit. And then he translated some texts which was said were first translated by him and not others. And I mean, that's a disputable thing, but that's what was said. And I was very young and I started reading some of them. And the first one was the Mahanivan Tantra. So my first exposure to India was through the Adya Theosophical Society and reading these books by this former Chief Justice. And I'll come back a little bit later on in my presentation about that. But obviously you can see how this gentleman was truly and profoundly influenced by Sanskrit. Now, he died in 1936. And in the very same year, a Malaysian Tamil doctor arrived in Rishikesh and took Diksha and became a sannyasin and became Swami Shivanand and started the Divine Life Society. Now, these days, because it's 1936, almost 100 years ago, not much is said and spoken these days about Swami Shivanand, but he had a profound influence on the West through Indian culture and yoga. In 1943, my teacher, his name is Satyanand, he's now has his Mahasamadhi in Rikia in Jharkhand. He was I think the sub-editor of the Hindu, and he left everything and he said, "I need a guru." So he wandered all around India. And after meeting so many of these sadhus and these gurus and all of these people, he decided that even if he meets the right person, he will not touch their feet. Now, touching the feet these days, who bothers? 40 or 50 years ago, for those of you who are ancient like me, you remember that whenever you went to someone's home or you met someone senior, you always bowed and touched their feet, or at least did the protestation. Now, he traveled the whole of India at the age of 19, and he also arrived in 1943 in Rishikesh at the Divine Life Society started by Swami Shivanand. And it's said that he was walking up the steps of the Divine Life Society, and just as he reached the top, Swami Shivanand was standing there waiting for him. And before either of them could speak, what did Swami Shivanand do? Went to touch his feet. So immediately Satyanand realized that this person was to be his teacher and his guru. And then, of course, he wrote many, many publications. Now, then in 1957, another Tamil gentleman who was a Muslim was studying in Dehradun, and he failed his exams. And he became extremely depressed. And he just left Dehradun by bus or foot, we don't know. And he also ended up in Rishikesh. And this gentleman, the story goes, found himself sitting by the side of the Ganga. And his name was Abdul Kalam. And what happened? He's sitting there by the side of the Ganga. He's extremely depressed. He's in deep sorrow. He had wanted to be an Air Force pilot and he had missed out. And then apparently the story goes that he looked up and there was Swami Shivanand. And Swami Shivanand smiled on him and said, "Why so much sorrow?" And before he could speak, he said, "Don't worry, you're meant for bigger and greater purposes." So anybody who knows about Dr. Kalam and what an amazing human being, he was also an amazing yogi. And that's where the first samskaras he received about yoga. And he was a great follower of Swami Shivanand. Then, what did Swami Shivanand do that was so remarkable? During that period, what would happen was he decided, and he was a doctor by background, that he would start teaching the Indian community yoga. And naturally, in those days, just like now, the Indian devotees would go to see Swami Shivanand. when he would start to give them gyan and teach them about yoga, their response was what? Swamiji, हम लोग गृहस्थ लोग हैं, हम लोग आपको दान देंगे, आप बस आशीर्वाद दीजिए, हम लोग योगी लोग नहीं हैं. So then it dawned on Swami Shivanand that these foreigners who were turning up from nowhere in his ashram, they were really keen about yoga and they really wanted to learn. So he said to these foreigners, bring me telephone books from Europe, from America, from UK. And he collected all these telephone books, and it had, in those days, the full address. Now, don't forget that when we're talking about the 30s, 40s, and 50s, books were very valuable things. So valuable that anybody who had a book would have a glass shelf case and keep the book as a very valuable item. And they were a luxury. They weren't something that everybody could easily have. And what he did was he started to get everyone to take the addresses and send these books for free across Europe, across America, across UK. Now, you imagine you're in Germany or you're in the UK. India is some exotic place with cobra snakes, elephants, and maharajas. And a book arrives. And you open this book and you've never even heard the word yoga. And you read from the front of the cover to the back of the cover of this book. And it impresses you so much and changes you so much. So what? No, sir, it's clear. Okay. So what happened then was they would send donations and Swami Shivanand would print more books and he would send them across the world. So Indian culture started in its own gentle way to go from door to door and shore to shore across the planet. Now we come up into the early 70s. And my father was a psychiatrist. So in the early 70s, not many people flew in aeroplanes. It was like 0.001% of the world's population. It was a luxury. And my father, as a psychiatrist, decided that he would go to the United States and study something called transactional analysis in psychiatry. Now, my mum, when he returned, said, look, we've spent all this money on you. We've sent you to America. Now it's my turn because here everything's equal. And she was a yoga teacher and she had given many yoga classes and many yoga conventions in Sydney. So she researched and she found that there's this famous yoga school hidden away in Mongir, Bihar. Now we're talking of the 70s, okay? So Bihar is this place that when you go there in those days, electricity, bisli kabhi kabhi aa jata tha na. Aisa nahi ki tha. And hot water was a luxury. Anyway, my mother went there, she did a yoga teacher's training course, and she came home. While she was there, she met one sadhu and she was very impressed with him. So she said, I will send you a ticket, please come to my country. So there I was, thinking to myself, you know, what's all this about India? So much so that one day when I arrived home and I was going to a private school, I came home and I looked in my bedroom, and we were living in a very affluent part of Sydney overlooking the harbour. There was a sadhu in my bedroom. Now, just to give you some context, I'd never seen an Indian, a Chinese, maybe not even an Aboriginal. And there is this gentleman in a langoti sitting in my bedroom. So naturally, at the age of, I think I was about 11, it made a very deep impression on me. And, you know, he lived with us. Now, what happened was our friends were also quite intrigued by this mysterious gentleman. So we decided to share him. So we took him, dropped him off at our friend's home. And this is probably one of the first yogis that had visited Sydney and Australia. And then by the evening, he had not returned. So I became quite worried. So I went to my mum and I said, what happened to our yogi? And my mum said, I'm not sure. We better ring and find out. We rang. After about an hour of his presence, they became scared. So scared, in fact, that they weren't sure what to do. So they picked him up, took him to a bus stop and gave him a lunchbox. So when they told us this, I said to Mum, maybe he's still at that bus stop. So we drove to that bus stop, and there he was, seated in the lotus pose. Picture this. This is the first time in Sydney, Australia. People were offering him food and he was giving satsang. Now, I went up to him and I said, Swamiji, Yogiji, what are you doing? He said, look, I've come here for this purpose. I know you people would pick me up sometime. So naturally, that made a huge samskara, a huge impression on my mind. And I was thinking, I have to also go to India. Now, of course, getting an air ticket to India at the age that was between 11, I got it when I was 13, is an almost impossible task. And that too, from a psychiatrist being my father. So I thought the only way I could achieve this was to use a little bit of psychiatry myself. So I said to my father, that time actually, I think I was going to a public school, and that's before the sadhu had arrived. I said to my father, if I come first or second in the whole grade, you have to give me a ticket and send me for 8 weeks, just like my mum. And my dad looked at me, laughed because my grades weren't very good, and said yes. But then later on, what he did was, just in case, so I didn't come first or second, he took me out of a public school and put me in the most expensive private school with some of the brightest kids. Now, what did I do? I was studying about Yoga Nidra. I was using the practice in Savanyas and Yoga Nidra, doing my asanas and my pranayams before my studies. And I actually became second in my whole school. So I went to my father, I got that ticket, and off I went, and I traveled to India. This is in the early 70s. So at the age of 13, in December 74, I arrived in Calcutta. So naturally, India, as you can understand, has made a huge impression on me. Now, one of the other experiences I want to share with you, because in India, with Indian culture, one of the things that you learn is everybody has a different language, and languages have their own special uniqueness and character. And of course, one of the things that's always disappointed me is the emphasis put on English. This is my personal view, I take this view personally because if you study British history, you'll find that in Britain, in the early 13th century, 12th century, the clergy and the people who had knowledge spoke and wrote in Latin, and the peasants spoke in Welsh, Irish, and English, but could not read or write. So naturally, when the British Raj happened in India and they saw the importance of Sanskrit to the people, they replaced it with English. Now, why am I saying this? Because I spent some time in Delhi when Indira Gandhi was the Pradhan Mantri, and I was with the Chief Justice and we were living next door. Now, obviously, I'm with the Chief Justice of India, and every day he would come home at about, say, 3 p.m. and we would have not Indian culture, but like a British high tea. These guys with plumes would come with the hot tea and the biscuits and everything, and we'd sit on these big grass green lawns. I'm sure you've seen them there in Safdarjung Road and Prithviraj Road and Lodi Road. But something special used to happen, which I can never forget till this day. His elder brother was a Sanskrit scholar, and he used to sit there and chant for about an hour. We would have our tea in absolute solitude and just listen to the Sanskrit chanting. And Raghunath Mishra, his wife, and myself would all be completely at peace just listening to this wonderful Sanskrit chanting. So naturally, that also made a great impression on me. And even when I think of it now, it brings me happiness and it brings a smile. Now, obviously, having spent all that time in India and then coming back to a country like Australia, I was a Gora Bihari when I arrived back in Australia in the early 80s. India had said, enough, you go back. So one of the things that I brought back with me was the business culture. And this is something that probably gets missed a lot in India, is that particularly amongst certain communities, like the Mawaris, the Banyas, and the Sindhis, they have some amazing traditions amongst which they teach their children. And one of the things that they taught me in business, and this is a very strong business principle of Indian culture, it's not how much you earn, it's how much is left over. And I tell you, that has helped me so much in my life. And it's been profound. Now I've written a few notes here. Now, of course, yoga has become very much, and Indian culture through yoga and even Ayurveda has very much become part of mainstream in the West. So much so that now in our universities, when people study medicine, they actually have in the medical faculties separate faculties which are called complementary medicine or indigenous medicine. Now, what's interesting about this is that, of course, China's giving a lot of funding. It's meant that medicines like Ayurveda and that have now a place in the West to be studied, appreciated, and understood. But the significance is even more than that. My father passed away in December 18. So my mother wanted to do a proper puja by the Ganga. So in February or March 19, I took my mum and we went to the river Ganga in Mongier. And with the Swamis there, we did what's called, I think the pronunciation is Astiti Visranjan. We did the puja for my father. Now, this is true Indian culture. And I mean, you read about it, you hear about it, but it was an amazing experience for us. And it really brought closure for me with my father. But something else also happened at that time. My mum's quite elderly now, and she was not well in the Yoga Institute. So they called a doctor. This young, bright, articulate young Indian lady came. She came in her German car. She had a gentleman wearing a topi and a driver, and she was very official. And after she met my mum and gave her whatever needed to be done, she asked her a simple question. Why are you wasting your time here? What do you get from an institute like this? And then this sowed a question in my mind, which later I pursued. And I asked, and I think in this year it's now changed, but up until previous years, when you do an MBBS in India, there is nothing about Indian traditional medicine. Now, you may not accept Indian traditional medicine. That's totally your choice. But if you're going to be a doctor and you're prescribing antibiotics and medication, you need to understand your patient and you need to understand what possibly they may also be taking. So gladly now I hear that at least now in psychology and also in medicine in India, there is some effort to put some of India's traditions and some of its culture into the curriculum. Now, what I would say to all of you as professors, you have a profound job, and that profound job is to inspire your students to deeply appreciate their culture. And of course, Indian culture is vast and it's very different, but to put positive samskaras in them. Now, I want to give you a couple of very light-hearted but interesting examples. In India, when you travel, sometimes you'll be served doodh with haldi, milk with turmeric. These days, if you ask the young citizens of India, aapko doodh mein haldi dalna hai, they'll put their hands back and say, no, thank you. I don't even want to hear about it. Yet, you go to a Starbucks and you can have a turmeric latte for $7. The second one, I've worked in a Hindi film. So I really wanted to work in this film क्योंकि उस film में थोड़ा आप हिंदी में बात करेंगे थोड़ा सा अब उस film में हम लोग कॉमेडी है लेकिन हिंदुस्तान का संस्कृति वो दूध के बारे में देसी गाय तो देसी गाय क्या करता है A2 milk अब आजकल के बच्चे लोग हिंदुस्तान में अगर आप पूछेंगे A2 milk वो समझ में नहीं आएगा दिल्ली में जब मैं मदर डेयरी के पास जाता है और दूध लेने के लिए जाता है हम बोलते हैं हम गाय का दूध चाहिए तो बच्चे लोग हमसे पूछते हैं अरे तुम क्या बोल रहा है गाय का दूध तुम ऐसे क्यों पूछते हैं आप बोलते बाकी भैंस का दूध है ऋषि विश्वकर्मा को मैं प्रणाम करता है लेकिन हमको गाय का दूध पीना है अच्छा तो मैंने सोचा आप लोग को दिखलाएंगे अब देखिए अब आजकल हिंदुस्तान में A2 देसी गाय का दूध कौन पीता है लेकिन देखिए मैं कुछ दिखलाना चाहते हैं आप लोग को ये जो है ये न्यूजीलैंड A2 मिल्क है सारा चीन इसको मंगाता है ये भी आप पीने को भी मिल जाता है अब देखिए इंडियन कल्चर कहाँ कहाँ पहुंच जाता है और मेरे समझ में क्या होता है कि विदेश पहुंच जाता है, हम लोग उसको रीब्रांडिंग, रीपैकेज बना करके फिर आपके पास वापस भेजता है. So now, on a lighter but and still a serious note, one of the ways that Indian culture can be transformed across the world is through the embassies and consulates. And I must say, because I've been in India for many years, for 40 years now, backwards and forwards, it's been sadly lacking. But now since 2014, there's been a huge change. And now even in my local Indian consulate here in Sydney, in 1 year, there may be 60 different events from a Tamil convention to Ayurvedic, to yoga, to business, to everything to do about India, which is fantastic. And I think that's really, really important. And I appreciate that. So now you'll find in most of the developed countries, when you go to your Indian consulates, you'll see on the signs there, one floor is devoted, to yoga, and another to teaching languages. So I'm really happy about that and very excited. Now, for me personally, how has yoga impacted me personally, and how has Indian culture impacted me personally? I understand that I practice something called sadhana. And what that means is that every morning I just take out 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes if I don't have the time. And I practice a series of asanas, they are body postures, a series of pranayam, they are breathing techniques. And then I sit quietly and do a simple meditation. The asanas and the pranayam just help me sit quietly, sit steady, and sit peacefully so I can do a simple form of meditation. And I'm all sure you've all heard that Harvard has said you only need to sit once in your lifetime and do a meditation technique, and they've actually found changes in the way the brain functions. So that to me has been one of the greatest and most wonderful gifts. And of course, in this lockdown period, I spend about an hour every morning, and I'm absolutely loving it. Now, I think have I spoken my 45 minutes?
No, you still have around 7 minutes.
I have 7 minutes. Okay, 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. I might just talk about. Okay, so the other things, I may just fill in a little bit about myself. I recently did a series for Doordarshan called Wagya Teste Season 2, and that was on Indian cuisine and culture. And why I enjoyed and why for me that was so important is I found a different community and a different food group. So, and I'm a vegetarian. So how many people realize that you can go to a Parsi and have a Parsi vegetarian meal? And Parsi chai is like Iranian chai. Similarly, I did that with Bihari, Nepali, Tibetan, and that was a wonderful experience for me. All was done in Delhi, and I very much appreciated that. I mean, one of the great introductions to India across the world, of course, is through food. Before, it used to be just our wonderful Punjabi Sadajis. But now there's a great variety of different Indian restaurants. Yes, and here is another fusion one for you. When I was shooting a commercial for Singapore Airlines, a Hindi commercial, we had a meal at an Indian restaurant in Perth, and they served us avocado lassi. So for you South Indians who know what avocado is, the North Indians don't, it was absolutely magic. And I also had golgappas. They would serve a long one for about, which was just amazing. So that I'd like to share with you. The other part I'd love to share with you is that for me, my travels in India, especially in the rural parts of India and the villages, has been magic. I've enjoyed every minute, and especially in the late 70s, early 80s. At that time, there was very little development, very little infrastructure, and you basically just lived with the village people in their mud huts, and it was a unique and very wonderful experience. Okay. I'm just reading the little notes below. So I think maybe now we can go on to a question and answers session if you like. And if not, of course, I can speak more in depth about some other Indian experiences and culture.
Okay, sir. I think I have to thank you for putting your thoughts together and presenting us, in brief, your journey in India, your stay in India, and how Indian culture is shown outside. We as Indians, all might not have traveled abroad, but then we realize that Indian culture is international and not just in India, because people carry with them, because we find all Indians almost settled in all countries of the world. And you did mention to me 2 weeks ago that, around 40% of the population of Sydney are Indians. And I don't miss Delhi, you mentioned that.
I don't know, 40%, but we do have, I think, between 7 and 9 lakh Indians now.
Indians in Sydney.
Australia is less than the population of Delhi. And we have about maybe 9 lakh Indians, mostly highly skilled and wonderful. I mean, wonderful contributors, because they're all very enthusiastic, husband and wives, working very hard. At every train station, there's a Sadaji. So, and you can go to your Sadaji and say, Shastrakal Paji, you always get a smile. But very active. In Sydney, we have, I think, 67 Indian associations. Just to give you an example, there is even, may I say it, a Haryanvi association. And I know them well, and they're wonderful people. And had the pandemic not been on, they were going to have in the World Trade Center here a 3-day Bhagavad-Gita chanting session for all the Haryanvis of Sydney. So yes, it's a very dynamic Indian community here. And मुझे जब Western suburbs Indian community के पास जाता है, मुझे नहीं लगता है कि
All right. So you are not missing India at all then. That is what you say, in spite of being in Sydney right now.
Actually, if the pandemic had not been there, my next trip was, I know a wonderful young pundit who arranges hawans with 100 or 200 pundits. His dear friends are the acharyas of Badrinath, Kedarnath Mandir. And he told me, I'll take you there, but not put you in the guest house, you'll stay in the temple. So pandemic आया तो मैं मौका नहीं मिला केदारनाथ बद्रीनाथ जाने के लिए, मन जाने का बहुत इच्छा है.
Okay. So there's there are a lot of people who are sending in their messages saying that we want Mr. Charles to continue to share his experience, but in between, there are a few questions you could answer and you can continue to. There's actually a request from one of my good friend. He's a young teacher here in Udupi College, Mr. Ramachandra. He says you did mention about a book written by Supreme Court Justice.
Yes.
Can you please name the book, sir, if you can? What's the title?
What he needs to search for, the Sir John Woodroffe, his pen pal name was Arthur Avalon. So the Supreme
Can you spell that, sir?
Arthur is Arthur.
Okay, Arthur. Okay, Arthur.
A new word, Avalon. Avalon. Now,
all right.
So John Woodroffe was a very humble man. Therefore, he kept himself very, very quiet. But he did not just one. He translated a number of texts from Sanskrit to English. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, sir. I think we will go with the next question.
Yes.
This is a question from Madam Meenakshi from Chandigarh, almost closer to Delhi. She says, sir, according to you, is yoga and meditation key factors to happiness?
Oh, absolutely. You see, I give you a very simple example. Say that you're going to get in an aeroplane, and in an aeroplane, you're going in one of those big jumbos, and you have a first class, business class, and what we call economy or cattle class. Okay. Now, somebody traveling first class, maybe the government of that country is spending $20,000 on the ticket. Somebody traveling business class is spending $5,000, and somebody traveling economy may be spending $1,000. I'm just giving it as an average, just to give.
All right. Yeah.
Now, the person who travels first class or business class has an a la carte menu, a beautiful bed, but they suffer from insomnia. They can't eat because they get indigestion and they have so many problems. But somebody can get into the economy, fall asleep, that's me, 8 or 9 hours, wake up at the other end of the journey. Why? Because my body is flexible. So yoga is a wonderful way of allowing the body to be flexible. And we mustn't forget, see, just take, for example, in the evenings when you have a very heavy meal and you get indigestion and you wake up the next morning, what happens is your eyes are bloodshot, correct? So the body is totally interconnected. You cannot be angry and screaming at somebody and breathing slowly. Right? So Swara Yoga, the Ida Pingala Shishumna, right? So what's fascinating, of course, is all these things are there in the Indian culture, in the Indian history and everything there, but they're being rediscovered in the West and rebranded.
Sir, before we proceed to Madam Sudha's question, I have a, you have acted in movies.
Yes.
Hindi movies, you have anchored for Doordarshan as well. Now, how did this call come? Just because you are an Australian who can speak Hindi, or was it your total involvement in the Indian culture that was the reason for your calling?
I was giving lectures at a university here in Sydney called UTS, which is one of our prime universities, to the postgraduate students and the about postgraduate in the business section about India for entrepreneurs and new opportunities. And one of the students was a Marathi gentleman who became a very good friend of mine. Wo bhi vegetarian tha. So he finished his MBA and he's from Pune. And all the Marathis will know his name. I'll tell you in a minute. And once he finished his degree and he was going home from Australia, this is many years back before I went back to India, he looked very despondent, very sad and everything. And I said to him, I said, what happened? He says, my dad runs a big IT company in Pune. He wants me to run it. But my heart is in Bollywood.
All right.
I said to him, go to Bombay, spend 2 years of your life, struggle. If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, go back to Pune. So his name is Shashank Ketkar. He is the Shah Rukh Khan of the Marathi TV industry.
All right.
So when I was working for that financial services company in Delhi, I used to fly from Delhi to Bombay and visit him on the Marathi TV serial sets. And mujhe to kurta pajama pehenna hai. So when I would visit, see, in Marathi TV serials, when they're shooting, lots of people get dressed up elegantly and they sit on the set hoping the director would like them and put them in the shot. I was completely naive and unknowing. And every serial I would turn up, the director would see me and he put me in the set. So slowly, whether it was Huna Sunmi, Karachi and some of those other hit Marathi TV serials, my face would start appearing. Then someone approached him and said, look, we're doing a Marathi film and we need Koi Gora who can speak a few words in Hindi. And he said, I know the Gora. And he rang me. And so it was never my intention, but I got this phone call in Delhi, come to Bombay, go to Kolhapur in Maharashtra. And you're going to be Jilla Adhikari Jackson. Now, of course, in that Marathi film, Uniso No, the beauty of that was that, and this is based on a true story. And of course, Marathis, they love to do historical true stories. He was the district magistrate in Aurangabad or that area. And he could speak Marathi, Sanskrit, and Hindi. And he would tell the local pundits that in his previous life, he was born a pundit. So he's equal. He was the one who decided to ban because he understood the meaning of Vande Mataram. So he was going to be promoted. This is the whole film. He was going to be promoted to the commissioner. And that time, Maharashtra and Gujarat was one state. So if he became the commissioner, the whole of Maharashtra and Gujarat, Vande Mataram would be banned. So Sarvakar made a plan with a young boy called Ananta Kere to have him shot. And at the end of the film, I get shot. Very well. Four bullets to me. So that got me. So once you're in I don't know if you've ever been on a film set, but I was in Kuala Lumpur with 2,000 village people looking on me. I was riding on a horse. It was 45 degrees, wearing a suit and tie.
Yeah.
Loved it. The adrenaline was amazing. Then after that,
Okay.
I did a guest appearance in a Hindi TV serial called Swaragani. And at that time, it was peak. And that episode went even higher. Or be bahut maza aaya, Swaragani mein.
Okay.
So,
you know,
the other. Yes.
So I think definitely that people who haven't watched 1909 वो film अभी लोग जरूर देखेंगे soon after this session. You know, they have a long break till evening, so definitely they'll watch. So the next question we have, I will combine the question. This is a question from Dr. Sudha from Mangalore, Besant Women's College in Mangalore.
Yes.
I will combine, and there's another question from a young teacher, Karthik Pai.
Yes.
I will combine their question. This is, you're such a versatile personality. You know, how do you find so much time to do this? From where do you find so much time? And how has your interest and respect on Indian culture and languages evolved? The time factor and your love.
Yes, sure. Because for the last 45 years, almost without fail, whether I'm in Delhi, Sydney, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, every morning I do my sadhana of 15 to 20 to 30 minutes.
Wonderful, sir.
It really keeps me on a high. I don't drink, I don't smoke. And when people ask me, why don't you drink? I tell them I'm already on a high. I don't feel high. So that's practicing of a sadhana. Now, I'm sure that you're a very diverse group. I must tell you, please, if you follow a particular faith or a particular religion, you can still practice your own sadhana, and it will make you a better person in that particular faith or religion. So, you know, and that is the thing that keeps me so charged. And health-wise, you know, I'm now almost hitting 60, right?
Okay.
I'd believe it. And, you know, when I meet my friends of course, in India, when I was working in Echo and Josh Talks and everything, everybody, their normal age is 25, 28. Yeah. And I would never tell my age. And then one day when they find out my age, they go into shock and say, you're older than my father. But the serious answer to that is have a regular series of practices that you do every morning without fail.
All right. I think introspection, looking within, I think is more important for happiness. Yes. There is a question from Dr. Purushottam. I believe you have answered this question, sir, but still he is asking you, how do we get to, the strategies to cultivate eudaimonic happiness? I don't get that word, eudaimonic, but you can just mention, what is this concept of happiness? Any strategy for that? Okay.
I think, because I think I'm talking to a lot of very well-educated or well-learned people.
Teachers,
teachers, and you're all professors and graduates. I think all of you now would have come to the understanding, particularly from the Western perspective, that the body is made up of a lot of chemicals, and everything we do has some sort of chemical reaction. Now, the yogis will talk about the pineal and the pituitary gland, right? Now, it's when we are happy, we actually produce happiness chemicals in the brain, and that stimulates us. So when you are a positive person and surrounded by positivity, it grows. When you're surrounded by negativity and you get more negative, it grows on you. So I must confess, this word, I have to share one thing with you, which maybe all of you are not aware of. If ever you if ever you're in the courts in India, the English used was finished 100 years ago in Britain. There are still words used in India that none of us know. So maybe this word is taken, is a proper English word, but we don't know it.
No, any specific word that you will say still used in courts, but not used in Britain right now? Like
showeth, pleading. So when you put your pleadings into a court, when you put them through your computer in India, because I used to work in many of the courts there. You will get red lines under all the words because it's no longer part of the traditional, regular
legal
Yeah.
vocabulary.
So we must understand, India is like a museum. It's a great preserver. It keeps everything and keeps it.
Yeah, we do preserve a lot of, apart from Indian culture, a lot of Western culture. And there's a question here from a young teacher from Rosario College in Bangalore, Madam Deepthi. She's asking you, as an Indian citizen, majority of them, like to follow the Western culture. How come you developed interest in Indian culture?
Well,
but one thing that we have to remember is Indian culture is also something which is foreign to you, was foreign to you.
What you see, think about it. Well, okay, when I was born, my mum was a ballerina, and I'm the first child.
Okay.
So after my birth, she had to give up ballet, and she took up yoga. From the time I was born, I was exposed to this word called yoga, and we lived in a very beautiful place here in Sydney. And my mum used to give yoga classes, and she didn't have a fixed fee. People give a donation. So I would just come sit there, even at the age of 6 or 7, and chant Om. So, I mean, this is what we call positive samskaras. So the duty of every parent for their child, if they want them to be happy, is to help them with positive samskaras.
So for the answer, for the answer that you gave, there is an observation from Madam Divya. Actually, she had given an observation a little earlier, but I would just share. She writes, very happy to have the honor to hear from you, sir. It really is interesting how people of our country probably do not value our culture and are so quick to imbibe the influences of the West. Your talk is a testament to that and gives us reasons to take our culture and rich heritage seriously. And she says, thank you, sir. So that's an observation from Madam Divya here.
Yes.
She's the owner of M. D'Souza Caterers here in Bangalore, and she's a versatile, trainer as well. She has done her training in NLP, the Neuro-Linguistic Programming. We have another question from Mr. Raghavendra.
Yes.
He says, so what is your opinion about unity in diversity of India? You spoke about many languages. We say you travel 10 kilometers away, people speak a different language. So, how do you see India, on these lines, unity in diversity?
Okay. Because I've traveled a lot and I have studied a little, I'm not a professor, but I have studied a little bit of history across the planet. One of the extraordinary things that somehow India has managed to preserve is this a land of seekers, as Sadhguru would say, because if you think about it, if you look at the politics of the rest of the world, the monarchical system and the religious system at the time, whether it was Christian or Islam, it didn't matter. Beliefs were forgotten, beliefs were taken away from us. And we had to follow a certain thing. Whereas in India, somehow the soil of India has allowed so many different people. Now, I'll give you a perspective from Christianity.
All right.
In Australia, if I start talking about Christianity to another Christian, they'll just look at me and say, oh, I'm an accountant. Okay, you're a Catholic. But it was only in India I found out that the Protestants and the Catholics, they read different Bibles. Right. So India has this way of, accentuating or bringing out, the uniqueness of, and, nowhere else on the planet do we have a land where you have so many diverse languages and cultures.
Correct.
Nowhere in one community. And that is the uniqueness of India. And that's why the more you learn about India, the more you understand how little you know, right? And then the more there is to learn. There are many, many wise people that you come across, So that I'd say that too.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for that answer. We have another question from a young teacher, Madam Anusha. She is asking you, sir, are you a voracious reader, sir? Apart from, history, culture?
When I spent those 11 years in Mongia, I must have read about 40,000 books. Okay?
Oh, wow. Then I think...
But today, I'm addicted to my Mac. So
all right.
So I read what comes in front of me on front of my Mac. I'd love to get back to books. And I do have a number of books just sitting there waiting for me to read. But yes, the form of reading has now changed. It's, we spend so much time in front of our computer.
Correct.
So I read a lot, but I will also share with you that we live in an age now where if you have particular interests, it's very easy on this something called Google Alerts and so many things to get that information regularly.
So we have a concept of audiobooks as well right now. So the book itself reads for you. So I think those interested can go for that. Madam Anusha's question was, can you suggest a few books which has a blend of both psychology as well as spirituality, if in case you would like to suggest?
Okay.
If not many, at least one or two.
I'm going to show you. Now, first I will tell you I have a bias. Okay. The bias is, this is written by my late father, but this book has served as a very unique book in the West. I'll just show you this book here.
All right.
Okay. It's called
Practical
Yoga Psychology.
Oh, wonderful.
Now, this book is available on Amazon. What does this book do? This is the book, particularly in countries like Australia and Europe and America, when people start practicing yoga and the family starts to get very worried about them. What strange practices are they doing? This is the book they buy and give to their family members to read. So basically, it's just in a nutshell, it says, practical yoga psychology is an attempt to simply blend the teachings of yoga with those of psychology, psychiatry, and other branches of Western science to give us an overview of human personality, an idea where we are going, and guidelines to proceed on our journey.
All right.
Okay, that's the first one. Now the second one is also another bias because my dad wrote this book. But this also is extraordinary because I think you've never heard of this concept before. This is the psychiatrist's view of the Bhagavad-Gita. Now, I'm sure nobody's read a psychiatrist's view of the Bhagavad-Gita. This is this one. And he explains that Arjuna is having a nervous breakdown with Krishna, and it goes into all the psychoanalysis of all the characters during the Mahabharata. So there's two. So what also I would share with you that one of the beautiful things...
So can you, Charles, can you just hold both the books so that people can see the title?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thoughts on the Gita and Practical Yoga Psychology.
Yes.
Yes. And both are written by Dr. Rishi Vivekananda.
That's right, yes.
And that's the name that your dad took, sir?
Yes. He now he's left us, but he spent a lot of time with a Swami called Swami Niranjan, who I think just got the Padma Shri or something 1 or 2 years back. They traveled the whole of South America, the whole of the States, and the whole of Europe for several years. From NASA to everywhere, just teaching about yoga, psychiatry, Western and the East. Yes. So
I think
that these are books, but I was absolutely delighted when we were shooting our film. Some of the shoots were done in Haridwar. So I walked into the bookshop in Haridwar and there were my dad's books.
Oh, wonderful, sir.
So I thought, oh wow, kahan tak nahi pahunchta hai. They're also translated in French, Spanish, but of course, I think in Hindi, I'm not sure, but French and Spanish they've also been translated.
When we meet personalities like you, we feel the world is very small. I think, sir, with your thoughts on yoga that you just mentioned, you have already answered my friend Sandeep. He's from Sharda College, Basrur in Udupi district. His question was, can yoga change the present scenario of human mind? I think you have answered that question. Definitely the answer to that is yes. I think there is another observation that I would like to share. This is from Dr. Pratibha Patel, I beg your pardon, from SDM College here, postgraduate department, MBA. She says maybe the best thing about Charles sir is that he enjoys every bit of experience that life has been giving him. The positive sanskara is very much visible in his words. He is a beautiful example of how right lifestyle is empowering, free from smoking, alcoholism, non-vegetarianism, and negative thoughts. So, but there are quite a few, in our participating teachers and all those who have joined us, there are quite a few non-vegetarians as well. But then this is Madam's opinion, so we respect that opinion. Yeah.
But I
Do you think no? There are a lot of issues on foods in India.
Yeah.
Do you think non-vegetarian actually makes you violent, or thoughts become negative? Is it that so?
Okay. So when I had my Thai restaurants, most of my customers were non-vegetarian. Okay. Now, just pausing there for a moment, I think what all of us should try and do in our life is not preach, but live by example. And the greatest compliment or blessing you can receive from your friends, family, and colleagues is when someone gets to know you and 6 months later, they come up and they say, what medicine are you taking, or what religion are you practicing? You're always happy and you're always on a high. And you haven't said anything to them. So that, for yourself, helps you understand that maybe you're right on the right path because other people are feeling your positivity and your happiness. And two, you're not preaching. It's really, really important. Now, when we talk about meat, there's a couple of things that we have to understand about meat. The first thing is, it's only recently in the last 70 or 80 years that we have something called refrigeration. Before refrigeration, meat had to be killed fresh and eaten or salted.
Correct.
So meat was a luxury item for a large proportion of the population and very seasonal. Okay? So whilst we've always been eating meat, it's never been the situation since the beginning of mankind that you can have it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Right? Yeah. So this is one part of it. The second part of it is, it's really, really important that if you are eating meat, how is that chicken or how is that animal grown? Now, in Australia, when you get your eggs or your chicken, they actually have a label, and you can go on the computer and you can actually see the chicken farm, and you can actually see the chickens walking and how they live and what feed they're given and whatever. So this is really important, because don't forget, why did the UK get mad cow's disease? I mean, now we're in this pandemic, but there was another similar, very deadly pandemic when cows were going crazy. And even in Australia, when we had mad cow's disease, those whole areas were quarantined and people were in spacesuits, just like we have today, all around those areas. Because the cow was vegetarian, and the farmers, to boost their profits, were feeding them mash, feed, fish, chicken feathers, and whatever. So food is a science. Everybody's got a different composition. It should be, so there's no harm. If you want to eat meat, fine. But everything in moderation. And the quality of what you eat is also very, very important.
Correct. Wonderfully said, sir. Because that suits all people from all cross section of the society. Yes. So there are two more questions. Madam Sudha is asking you: have you written any books?
I haven't published it. I've written a book on my life. Okay, it's about 100 pages or something, and short stories, because I've met, from Indira Gandhi, I've met all sorts of amazing people in my life, and sadhus and mahatmas and all sorts of people. So I have it there. I haven't published it yet. But yes, that will come at some point. And, it's a perspective, because for 40, 50 years, when Indira Gandhi was shot, I was next door. So I've seen India on so many different levels. And I'd love to share that with people, because today, let's face it, most of India are very young. They've only been born in the last 30, 35 years. And, a lot of that pre-30-year history has been lost. So, or it's just not relevant. So people are they're watching Western stuff. So I would also explain that something, when we talk about samskaras, is why it's so important. I'll give an example. In Delhi, I won't name, there's a Hanuman temple, and the priest, the Pandit there, is a very dear friend. His son wants to be a doctor. The son, until I met him, could not say one Sanskrit sloka and wanted nothing to do with being a Pandit. And all he watched in his spare time was some Holland YouTuber. Now I've got him chant his slokas. Now think about that. That young boy is living in a temple with his dad, and yet he's completely disconnected himself from his culture and his I will be.
Okay.
And that was giving him a lot of trouble. So I feel delighted that I was able to inspire him to have a second look. And that's very, very important, that we stay close to our roots and understand our own culture and our own traditions.
Okay. I think that's wonderfully said, sir. So I think I have a final question here. This is from Madam Bhuvaneshwari, and it comes from the state that she comes from, a state that you like very much, Tamil Nadu. Because I think we have had, So her question is, what are the unbelievable realities we would encounter when we calm our mind by yoga or meditation?
In my, as a layman, in my own personal experience, when we find ourselves in very difficult situations, dreadful situations, and we turn them into a positive.
Okay.
Simple example. I'm on a train in Bihar. This is many, many years ago. And I'm in first class, and the bogie has been separated from the rest of the train, and the thieves are in there robbing everybody. Okay. And there's pandemonium. People are scared, people are crying, and people are screaming. I met them. That's another whole story. They didn't take anything from me. They became my friends.
Okay.
So, you know, we create our own environment. This is what the Bhagavad-Gita is about. You know, quite often society now wants to blame the external, whereas what we should be teaching ourselves is how do we be a better person to react to the circumstances that are around us and help others rather than others helping us.
Okay. Wonderful, sir. So, thank you for answering all the queries of our participants. Sir, have you been to Japan?
No, I have not been to Japan.
Okay. No, maybe.
Somebody speaks, I speak a little bit. Konnichiwa.
No. I don't want to speak Japanese. And I had a question particularly from Japan. I don't know whether in India we normally say, are there thieves in Japan? Is the question they ask. So people say yes, there are thieves in Japan, but they steal only from Japanese, not from foreigners, because they don't want to spoil the image of their country. Have you heard about this?
There was a beautiful example the other day, I don't know how true it was, of some poor person in Pakistan being robbed, and they just started crying. And the robbers became so guiltful, they gave everything back, gave them a hug, and left.
So you have to show the right emotions at the right time.
Exactly.
All right. So, your final thoughts to all our participants who are here. Thank you very much for answering all the questions. Your final thoughts.
Because I think you're all very learned scholars and you're all professors of some repute. All I would request, all I would ask is, whatever be your teaching pathway, find some ways, just very gently, to inspire and encourage your students to appreciate a little bit more of their own culture.
Correct. Yeah. Sir, आपको 1 मिनट हिंदी में बात करने का अवसर देता हूं सर.
मैं दक्षिण भारती को बहुत परेशान करता है. मैं दक्षिण भारत जाकर मुझे अंग्रेजी नहीं आता है, तो हिंदू लोग सोचते हैं मैं कश्मीरी ब्राह्मण हूँ, मुसलमान सोचते हैं मैं अफगान से आया हूँ. क्या मैं काफी लोग को परेशान किया, खास करके तमिलनाडु में बहुत मजा आया. केरला में ठीक है, केरला में तो ये लोग कहाँ से कोई नॉर्थ इंडियन को बैठा करके ट्रांसलेशन कराता है, लेकिन तमिलनाडु में मेरे साथ बहुत झगड़ा होता है. एयरपोर्ट्स में भी, बैंगलोर में भी, मुंबई में भी बहुत झगड़ा हो जाता है. अरे मुंबई में एक लड़की है, हमेशा जब मैं चेक इन करता है वो अंग्रेजी बात करता है, मैं हिंदी में, तो मैं हमसे पूछता है मैं तो हिंदी में बोल रहा है, आप अंग्रेजी में क्यों जवाब दे रहा है? बोलता आई एम क्रिश्चियन. मैंने उसको बोला तुम लैटिन सीखो.
And you did mention this to me as well.
हाँ जी एकदम.
All right. So on behalf of my college, sir, on behalf of all the participants who have joined in, आपको मैं नमस्कार करता हूं सर. और जब भी आप भारत वापस आए, आपसे एक गुजारिश है कि आप दक्षिण भारत, कर्नाटका, मैंगलोर जरूर विजिट करें. हम आपका इंतजार करेंगे और आपको होस्ट करने का हमारा एक बड़ा अवसर आपको dena padega. When you come back to India, definitely we'll host you in Mangalore sometime very soon, sir. And we all will be eager to listen to you face to face.
Nandri, Dhanyavadam, Nanni.
Yeah, wonderful, sir. So, Dhanyavadagalu, sir, for your presentation. See you then, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So, dear participants, we will be joining back at around 6:20 in the evening today for a session from Jeshe Tenzin from US. It will be early morning time for him. So, I request you all to join. The feedback form of day 1, I will be putting it in our group. So I request you to give your feedback at the end of the day, end of the second session, which will be from 6:30 to 8 o'clock in the evening. So once again, big thank you, Mr. Charles, for sharing your precious time, valuable time with us. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you.